So the X-Men is the next big saga on the chopping block of the Marvel machine, and Kevin Feige is now coming out here to try and tell us what we can expect from it, and he's talking about it being very comic accurate. However, there is a big catch to this, because he's not talking about the overall stories and stuff. Now, we'll get into what he's actually talking about, but it's funny because who is he put in charge of X-Men, the first movie on its way after Secret Wars? Well, he's put in Jake Schreier, the director of Thunderbolts, which he praises in this, but then in another interview, which we'll take a look at what he said, he talks about why Thunderbolts failed. So yes, he's admitted it's a failure. So can't wait to see all those websites and content creators and other YouTubers and stuff that were saying this thing is broken even, this thing is making money, this thing is a massive success and it was the best movie since the last Marvel movie. Can't wait to see them all turn around now and go, oh, you know what, I rewatched it and actually it's not as good as I remember, blah blah blah. Now that Kevin Feige has actually said, yeah, it's a failure, they'll come out and start saying it's a failure, this is why it failed. But let's take a look at what he's talking about with X-Men and what he says about Thunderbolts, because he does talk about the director for that to do X-Men, why that's a great idea, which by the way is a horrendous idea, and then to see the contradiction of why Thunderbolts failed. But it says Disney's acquisition of 20th Century Fox was completed in 2019, and comic book fans have been waiting to see the X-Men in the MCU ever since. There have been occasional references to mutants, Ms. Marvel and Namor for example, and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, The Marvels, and Deadpool and Wolverine hinted at what might be to come. In those, Marvel Studios put its own comic book inspired spin on characters like Professor X, Beast, and Gambit. Many of the original big screen X-Men will appear in Avengers Doomsday, but looking beyond that, a full-blown X-Men reboot is in the works and likely to kick off the next saga of storytelling. Talking to a select press at a roundtable last week. So Marvel and Disney chose the people who praise them all the time, clearly, if it's a selected press. Marvel Studios President Kevin Feige confirmed that the biggest way the MCU's X-Men will differ from what we've seen in the past is by embracing the comics in a way filmmaker Bryan Singer never did. Now, just before we go into what he actually says about this, he does throw a crap ton of shade at all the original X-Men movies. Not just the Bryan Singer, all of them. So this is what he says. There have been more X-Men movies than there were Spidey movies or Fantastic Four movies. So a lot has been done. But again, because it's almost a comic legacy unto itself, there's so much more to tap into it, and there's so many sagas within sagas for X-Men that's part of what we're talking about now, is which saga to grow and build to while doing the most important thing, which is introducing all of these characters and giving them their due in our first film. I'm not going to speak to the makeup of the characters, that will be in the first movie, but look at Galactus, look at Gambit in Deadpool and Wolverine, look at Wolverine in Deadpool and Wolverine. We want to embrace that, which was not embraced 25 years ago when I was around on those early X-Men movies, which is those comic accurate looks. So what he's talking about with this whole we're going to embrace the comics this time for X-Men isn't we're embracing the stories, not we're embracing what the characters actually are and stuff. No, it's the costumes. That's what he's going on. We're embracing the costumes. It's like, yippee. Like, who cares at this stage? It's like, we want the characters to be the characters they are in the books. Yeah, it's a bonus when you get them actually looking comic accurate with the costumes, but we're more interested in them actually being those characters. But then he says about Jake Schreier officially directing the first X-Men movie, saying this: Jack's an incredibly smart guy, and he's an incredibly talented filmmaker. We had a great experience with him on Thunderbolts. And if you saw that movie, what he did with those characters' interactions, he also has his pulse on, shall we say, a younger demographic. Not he's younger than me, for sure, but he's tapped into that in a way that I think is important. It was important for Thunderbolts, much more important for X-Men, because X-Men, as it was in the comics, will be a very youth-orientated, focused and cast movie. I.e., screw all of us that are over the age of 20, basically is what he's saying there. We want to focus on the kiddies. That's what he has just said there. We want to focus on casting super young actors to play these characters, but we also have our focus on the youth. We want the next gen. So your characters are going to be screwed because they are going to double down on the garbage they've been giving us. Younger cast. So you're telling me you're just going to repeat Days of Future Past and First Class and stuff like that because they went younger. But then you hear how he's praising Thunderbolts and the filmmaker and stuff. But then he also, in that same event, spoke about why Thunderbolts failed. Yeah, and he said this: it's that expansion that I think led people to say, do I have to see all of these? It used to be fun, but now do I have to know everything about all of these? And I think the Marvels hit it hardest, where people are like, okay, I recognize her from a $1 billion movie, but who are these other two? I guess they were in some TV show. I'll skip it. Thunderbolts, I thought was a very, very good movie, but nobody knew that title, and many of those characters were from a TV show. Some of them were still feeling the residual effects of that notion of, I guess I had to have seen these other shows to understand who this is. I think if you actually saw the movie, that wouldn't be the case, and we make the movie so that's not the case. But I think we still have to make sure the audience understands that. So what he's blaming the failure on Thunderbolts is the title, which they could have changed and tried to after the movie, and the fact that you had to watch a crap ton of other things before you watched it. And the irony of him saying, oh, you know, maybe we're trying to roll back on that, and yeah, that's not a good idea, and that's why we're struggling now. They doubled down on that when it came to Ironheart. Yes, Ironheart was filmed 3 years ago at this stage, but what did they still put into it? They released the thing saying, hey, if you want to watch Ironheart, here's just a couple of things you might want to check out to be able to see. There was eight shows and movies to watch to understand Ironheart. And that's what he's blaming Thunderbolts on failing. Oh, nobody knew the characters and nobody knew the name. By the way, you absolutely needed to watch half the other shows to understand anything in Thunderbolts. There was no way they put it out there that you could sit down and watch this and never have seen any of the Marvels and understand exactly what's happening, because you would have been looking at Avengers Tower going, hang on, what the hell is going on here? You wouldn't have a clue who Madam Hydra was. Nobody even remembered Ghost, Taskmaster. You'd have been like, who the hell is this? You had to watch so much to watch that movie. But this is the person they're putting in charge of X-Men. The guy who complicated the movie that Feige is now trying to make excuses of. Oh, you had to watch too much. What are they going to do with X-Men? Yeah, you're going to try and restart it, but you're going to be telling people, and probably confusing people, here's X-Men. Remember how we just gave you in Doomsday half of the X-Men, and now we're just going to show you the next half of X-Men, but they're all different and super young? This sounds like it's going to be just another disaster, and let's face it, you're not getting X-Men until probably 2030. At that stage, Kevin Feige mightn't even be around at Marvel. Whether he retires or whether he's, brought out to the pasture. In other words, we'll let you say you're retiring, but we're actually firing you because all of this stuff is bombing. I think you will see him leave, or at least look like he left on his own accord, if Doomsday and Secret Wars bombs. If they fail, I think he's out the door. And X-Men, yeah, it doesn't sound like it's gonna be on the right course. When he talks about, there's so many stories we could do, this is but the one thing we're doing that they didn't do back in the day is we're going to give you comic accurate looks, not bloody characters. The look, the costumes, we're going to give you the costume. Yeah, stupid. But anyway, do let me know what you think of all of this, and with that I shall leave it there for this one. So like, share, subscribe and all that good stuff. Cheers, and I'll catch you in the next one.